different things in terms of communities and buyers groups. Really honored to have both of you on here. And just to give a proper introduction on Latane's background, she's a chief market officer of Sixth Sense. And for those of you who are not aware, and incredibly impressive, not one, but two communities that she's been the architect for. So a lot of you may know her either through Empower CMO, which is a female-led CMO group, or the Sixth Sense Coffee Talk. Latane's been an author of a book as well. And I think another thing that was just blew me away was how you rallied a number of senior level leaders, Latane, for a cause in and around rallying against the price point of events from a certain industry provider who happens to be based in Connecticut. We won't name them, but amazing, amazing accomplishments. Thank you, and Kerry, for investing time. And Megan, you worked with Kerry. Maybe you could give a quick background of Kerry.
Yeah, you bet. So we're so excited to have both of you here. Kerry Cunningham is one of the proud architects of the infamous Serious Decisions waterfall. And I was proud to call him a colleague for many years at Serious Decisions and then also at Forrester. And Kerry recently left Forrester to join Latane at Sixth Sense as, I love this, their senior principal, which is a very, very serious title. And I'm hoping he'll tell us more about what that means. But yeah, we're excited for you guys to be here and let's talk about what's going on. But to kick things off, John Russo, do we have our poll of the week?
Yeah, absolutely. Our poll of the week this week, we talk a lot about attribution and account-based marketing. And one of the questions that came up, I think, in a lot of our prospect conversations is, how do you really measure campaign influence as part of account-based marketing? And a couple of things surprised me when I went out to this poll. First of all, for the number of questions that we get on this, kind of on an ongoing basis, I was a little surprised that there weren't more voters on it. So, 13 people, one vote can sway the percentage pretty significantly, but it's really pretty challenging to get influence type reporting, depending on what your model is and how you're doing it. We see some companies that use third-party tools. Some of them are blessed with having a data person that can do the analysis, or a data wonk that can bring all the data from disparate databases and put it in one system and kind of do that analysis. But it's a really tricky challenge, believe it or not, for a lot of companies. I don't know, Megan, if you had a point of view on this when you saw the survey.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, honestly. I think, and we were talking a little bit about this before everybody joined the discussion today, but I think that the fact is most of us let our tool set, whether it's CRM or marketing automation or whatever tools we have, kind of dictate the way we measure. And it never ceases to surprise me how many companies still stick to first touch or last touch attribution, even though no one will say that that is the right way to evaluate marketing performance. And I think that that's an unfortunate thing that we've sort of become the victims of the technology in some cases. But this is where I'd love actually for Kerry and Latane to come in, because I think one of the benefits of having a great community of leaders that you work with regularly and marketers that you work with regularly is that you hear about a lot of things that people find still hard, and attribution has to be one at the top of the list. But I'd be curious to hear from you both. I mean, what things are you finding are still really difficult for revenue leaders right now? Measurement or other things?
So I guess, first of all, to be fair, or one woman's opinion, I don't think that basic attribution is a bad thing. It's not how you measure overall marketing performance, but it's a great data point. Where did the final reveal happen? It's interesting, right? It helps you understand your CTAs. It helps you understand your, different channels. It is not what you take to your CEO and the board and your team and say, this is what we did. This is like the reason we exist. But it's not a bad thing to have, in addition to a lot of other things.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's part of the story. I think the problem is when people use it as the whole story. Excuse me. What other things do you think people are sort of finding challenging these days? What do people come to you with as use cases or challenges?
I would just comment on the last one and say, if people only used attribution the way that Latane just said, it would be fine. But that isn't how people use it. I think what you just said, Megan, a moment ago, we let our tool set dictate how we measure and then actually do a lot of other things, is exactly what has been happening over the last really 10 years or so. And so we measure a lot of things that either don't matter or it might even point you in the wrong direction, because that's a thing we can measure. As you well know, our former colleague Ross Graber and I did a presentation last year that was entitled, I think, marketing sourcing, your pathway to irrelevance. That's the thing that you're really focused on as a marketing leader. You are pinning yourself in a very small box that isn't going to matter very much. We also did a presentation a couple of years ago called Why Your Falling Lead Conversion Rates Are a Good Thing. And for the same reason, it's if that's what you're looking at and you're just looking at your productivity through that lens, it's not going to put you in a good light. And that is exactly for the reason that you said. That's what the tools allow us to do easily. And so that's what we do. But it isn't what we ought to be doing. That's for sure.
I think there's something that's going unsaid here. I mean, isn't part of it simply how kind of brute force pay systems are and incentive systems? I mean, because I know as a global demand gen person, if I could negotiate specific measures that I knew that I could move, and I could negotiate getting paid on those measures, sometimes I would set aside what I really knew the goals to be to make sure I hit the measures that would maximize my personal return. And so as a CMO, that's at very big companies. As a CMO, I have to figure out how I can get the right things done and get my people paid. I'd love to hear Latane comment on this, because she has such a strong background in sales and how to where the incentives and the payment structures are so clear and usually work pretty well. How do you translate that simple model to something that works better for marketing long-term success? Like you've done at 6 Cents with wonderful strategic brand marketing that's really hard to attribute on sort of a one-to-one basis. How did you make that transition? How do you think about measuring marketers and negotiating the ability to do strategic marketing investment versus tactical?
So, I think I do have an interesting perspective. So, for those of you who don't know me, I started in sales, and I had a variety of selling roles and sales leadership roles, and then sort of just got asked to look after marketing for a while we found a real CMO who was not going to be me. And, as soon as I got in the role, I said, well, what's my quota? I need a quota. I can't operate with no quota. What are we doing? And so the first thing that I did was worked with our revenue ops or sales ops at that time, a gentleman by the name of Corey Geyer. We've worked together now 2 jobs. And we said, well, how much pipeline do we have to create? Who cares where it comes from? Because Chris, our CEO, and the other Chris, our CRO, doesn't care. And I, as an AE, didn't really care either. And we had a big channel motion. And channel is a really, really great way to sell. And so, I just said, how much do we need? And okay, now let's figure out realistically where it's going to come from. And that's all we did. And then every month we just track, did we make it or not? mean, it's not that hard, really. I mean, it gets hard when you don't make it and you have to start to think through, okay, let's do the forensics on why, but I think that we make the evaluation of our success way too small. And so to me, when I think about like what is success, it's predictable revenue, and the formula is predictable pipeline, which I can definitely be a big part of. It's your sales velocity formula, which is win rates, ASPs, and conversions, which I can definitely be a big part of, especially when you think about product marketing and all the things that you do around that. So I measure competitive and non-competitive win rates, and, we have a whole CI team. So that's a big part of what I can help do. And then it's NRR, which again, customer champagne toast, customer community, the virtual user group that happens every month, our whole release process and cycle that we're doing, that's marketing. So why would I just want to say that my value is an inbound hand raiser when that's such a small piece of really what I think the function is for. So so I look at all of those things.
What I heard is that that attribution is just a small part, right? Direct attribution is a small part.
Yeah, and I think before you joined, I said I look at it because it's interesting. There's lots of things that are interesting, upsell versus cross sell, adoption of a new feature. I mean, there's tons of stuff that I find interesting and look at. Net new users, like there's tons of things, how many logins to our customer community, and how many people are showing up to our virtual user group, and how many engaged contacts we have within each customer. Those are all things I care a lot about too. So I just think, I don't know, maybe, and I mean, one of the reason I changed my title is because I feel marketers have really like sold themselves short. And, when you think about the career path for a CMO, there's not a lot of places to go. And that's because we still aren't seen as super strategic in a lot of cases. Some cases, yes, but not in a lot of cases, no. And I think part of that is when you like my CFO doesn't say that he's the chief financing officer and say, guess what, guys, I closed the books 15 times and it was really accurate. And, to the penny, I know how much Latane spent on that dinner the other night, which he actually does know, but he doesn't rock around with that, right? I mean, he's talking about our pro forma and where we need to be and like how we're going to, track to the next big thing and what that looks like. He owns his domain, which is finance. And so I think that when you focus on the ing of marketing, leads, hand raisers, attribution, how many blogs I wrote, you're just kind of doing yourself and your company a disservice. And so to me, I think there's three pillars that marketing but a chief market officer owns. One is market, and that's the number one thing, right? So if you're in, actually, we did a study recently, and if you don't have, and the top reasons why the fastest growing companies had successful go-to-market was not leads or how much attributed to marketing. It was product market fit and alignment on target accounts. Those are market. That's not how many forms or this or that. And so, if you don't get that right, you're going to end up working really, really hard for not a lot of result. And so, taking opinion out, bringing data, bringing customer insights, doing the TAM analysis, doing that ideal customer profile analysis. I have someone on my team now just for market insights, like what's going on with our competitors, what's going on with analysts, like it's critical. And if you don't have that right, you're going to end up working really hard. And then the next thing that I obsess over is experience. And I think that your brand is not what you say about yourself. It's what people experience and say about you. And so, thinking about, time on website, like a lot of things about like, how are we taking the friction out of getting to know us, right? Are we getting people to our communities? Are we creating a great experience? Like how many customers are coming to the virtual user group, all those things around like, how are people experiencing us? And then the last one is revenue. And the revenue, I kind of gave the formula, which I think is predictable pipeline, sales velocity formula, and NRR, and, unpacking all of that. And I mean, the good news is if you're delivering on your predictable pipeline, no one's going to ask you any of the detailed questions. If you're not, is when you got to start to be able to drill down and in and understand. And I think that's where, it's a little more challenging than I'm oversimplifying, which I understand as well.
So I have
No, I think this is all great advice. Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
I just have a takeaway. Take a former sales leader and put them in the CMO role, and all things will be fixed. Because she really understands how to navigate the issue here that I raised of attribution is in place for marketers to find a way to get variable pay.
Fair.
Now, granted, I don't, my team has KPIs. I tried doing quotas and actually I had accelerators and kickers and this whole thing. And it ended up being kind of a disaster. So I don't do that anymore. But I think as a leader in marketing, you kind of know who's like on top of their shit and who's not. It's pretty easy to figure it out.
Well, I would love, I think related to this, Kerry, you mentioned that you all recently did a poll and got some pretty interesting results. And I think, Latane, it sort of builds on what you were just saying about, are you focused on the right things? Are you paying attention to the right things and not just the things that you think you should be there, or that may be misleading? Kerry, can you tell us a little bit about the poll?
Absolutely. So we conducted a poll, actually did it twice, once on LinkedIn and then during a webinar that we just did. And the results were exactly the same in both. The questions that we asked the audience are, when do you think you should find out about a buying process that's underway in your target audience? And then when do you find out? All right, so what's ideal and what's the reality? We had 114 responses during the poll. 97% of those said they wanted to find out before the buying process starts, like to be able to anticipate it, or as it's just starting. Right? So that's not surprising. That's what we expected to find. What we also expected to find and did find is not surprising also, which is when you ask people when they actually find out, nobody answered before it starts. Something like 20% said they find out as it starts. And then about 60% said they either find out when vendors have been shortlisted and they happen to be one of them, or just at a random time, right? And when you think about it, if when you find out about a buying process is somebody came to your website and filled out a form, or you were outbound prospecting and happened to reach somebody, that's just purely random. People don't fill out forms when they first get to your website. We know that. And you reach people at completely random times. So there's a huge disconnect between when everybody knows they should find out about a buying process and when they actually do. So Latane was talking about predictable revenue growth. How can you have predictable anything if you're finding out about buying processes at random times? when a sales organization says, well, our sales cycle is somewhere between 3 months and a year, depending upon, that's what we're talking about. We find out at the end, we find out at the beginning, they're all different. So a big part of, my whole history is really talking about buying groups and why we've got to focus on the group and not the lead. That's why we think lead-based attribution is not a great idea, because there's a whole big group involved. If you can start to see the activity of that group out across the internet, not just on your website, then you can start to see the beginning of those buying processes and get involved early. You may not get involved early. You may decide, it's good to know about it. I'll wait till we're sure that it's really something later on. But at least knowing about it up front, to me, that's like marketing shop. It's the way we built the demand unit waterfall. It's which are your ICP accounts, which of them are in market, and then focus on those guys and get them to come engage with you, right? So it's like a logical stepwise process. But if you don't do the first two things and you just wait for somebody to come get involved, it's going to be random.
Couldn't agree more. And I love the idea too of saying, how do you begin knowing what you're trying to achieve, right? It's like you start knowing, who do I care about, and am I getting enough of them to engage with me? And I think if you start with that spirit, and that goes back to Latane, your comment on too, you have to be aligned around your accounts, like know what you're trying to accomplish, know who you want to engage, and that makes all things way better. I would love now, though, to maybe switch gears a little bit. Latane, tell us, you've been able to build a couple of thriving communities for revenue leaders, and I think it would be terrific to hear you talk, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit about how you've built those and what it takes to engage a senior audience. What does it take to make it worth their time to show up? Oh, I think you might be on mute.
I mean, it's not a webinar without someone talking on mute. So there we go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Did it. So yeah, I get asked this a lot. And so a couple things that I have been very involved in building two communities. The empowered CMO community is all women, all B2B, more senior level marketers. And actually, it was originally started by our founder, Amanda Kalo, who was really big on investing in women and girls in STEM, and was a woman CEO and founder. And so she kind of got the ball rolling with a bunch of different dinners and had this vision for a retreat, which we've been able to really grow over time. And so that one again, and the reason I was very specific about who that audience was, and that one's not just CMOs, it's also CMOs who have become CEOs, which there's
Nice.
very few of.
Yeah.
And it's also women who full-time sit on boards.
Mm-hmm.
So we're appealing to typically CMOs later in their career, the more experienced ones, mm-hmm. who A, want to give back, and B, want to figure out their own and beyond. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of groups that cater to that audience. And there's some specific challenges around being a woman in an executive room. It just is what it is, right? And so every year we say, should we invite men? And every year we're like, there's a lot of stuff that are all men and we're the only woman. Like, let's just keep it how it is. And so it's a very special, unique, defined audience. And you guys are marketers, you get that, right? But I take so many calls on communities where people say, well, so this is my buying group. So I sell to sales and revenue ops and developers. So I want to create a community for all those people and la, la, la. And I'm like, but they don't want a community with each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or maybe they do, I don't know, but like, why, and so I think the first thing you have to think about is like, what makes this audience alike? And I believe it's better to have a much smaller community that is very alike, mm-hmm. than a huge community that is super rando. And so like, we're very, very particular about, and actually for retreat and some of these other things, we have a limited capacity. And so we want people that really want to be there. And so that's like my first and number one rule is smaller, and the more alike the audience is, the better. The second sort of rule I have about community is the audience is the content. So it's not your show. It's not Six Senses show. Like the women or on CMO Coffee Talk, the CMOs on Coffee Talk are the content. Like they're the smartest people in the room. Like sometimes we bring experts and blah, 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 but for the most part, it's about them. You know, I think the other thing is like, I think there's the job is hard. And so I think there's like an element of, again, and this is why being specific about the audience, like if it's a group of all marketers, there are things I'm probably just not going to share. If it's a group of CMOs, there's challenges and things that I probably will share. And so again, making sure that if you want to really foster, and it just depends on what you want to do. Like for me, it's about authenticity and deep relationships and connect. I mean, I live for this. Like my favorite thing is to throw a dinner party of 8 people and sit around for 5 hours. You know what I mean? So it's sort of my, like, I guess what I love to do anyway is small, really, really meaningful. And so that's to me what we're always trying to create with our communities. And then the last thing I'll say about it is I recommend not ever going it alone. And partners are really important to creating a community. And you know, I look at the audience and I want a certain number of people that probably will never buy it from me, and that's okay, but they just bring interest and ideas and they make it vibrant. And so, you know, you're always, at least for me, like we just talked about measurement, and like one of the things I measure is both of these audiences and what the makeup is all the time, and making sure I feel like it's the right makeup of folks for a really like rich environment. And the same thing how you would think about a dinner party. Like, you know, you would invite people that you think would get along and have stuff in common. And so anyway, that's how
I've noticed you've bifurcated, to your point about the kind of the micro approach, at least with the Coffee Talk, you've bifurcated the coast. So the advantage of that is you get kind of that East Coast early morning feel, and CMOs that kind of already somewhat know each other, and probably the same thing on the West Coast, because I've participated in a few of the East Coast ones and grateful to participate in it. And I've also noticed the Slack channel too of that's the global 24/7, all sorts of great ideas populate there, which I think is a stroke of brilliance to connect.
Matt. I mean, Matt has done a great job. I find Slack anxiety inducing. So I feel bad. I suck at it. But you do need someone that's really into it and curating it. And because I tried to do one with I just think the empowered CMOs, it's a different audience and they like weren't into it at all. And I wasn't committed enough to it. So it was kind of like a dud. So we cut that off. But yeah, I think too, like, don't just start, like, again, until everything's about expectation setting, right? So if you go out and say, we're going to have this Slack channel, it's going to be 24/7 and 1,300 CMOs are going to be in it. And then when you only have 20 people kind of jamming, you feel like it was a failure, right? Whereas if you say, you know what, we're just going to get like 10 or 20 people together every week and kind of see where this goes. And then, now we're just going to start to share the content in a hub. And now, you know, people kind of want to keep the conversation going. So we're going to take the chat and move it over there. And you kind of got to let things play out a little bit. And then it sort of happens on its own, if that makes sense. But it also has to be somewhat community driven. Like, do you guys want a Slack channel? Or am I the one who wants a snack channel, or do they want it? Because and that's the thing. It's totally audience driven.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, right? And especially if you are not the perfect representative of your audience, like in this case, you are a great representative for your audience, but in many cases, I think as marketers, we're trying to reach people that don't have the same opinions as we do or the same needs as we do. And if we try to impose our own or say, but this is going to be really cool, and the audience won't care, that's a big, kind of a big warning sign. And Kerry, I'd love to maybe
that's
close.
the
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
partnering, Megan, right?
Yeah.
That's the partnering, is
Yeah,
like
for
make
sure.
sure that who you do it with represents the audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, actually. And yeah, I think always ask the audience, right? And find a representative of the audience. Well, and thinking about that kind of though, Kerry, I'm curious to know, like you spent many years, talking with hundreds, thousands probably of companies by the end of your time as an analyst. What is the biggest surprise you've had since moving from an analyst role to an operator role to what stood out to you?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I will say, I will just say, I'm going to say a couple of nice things about 6th Sense, because a couple of the biggest surprises are just how great the company is to work for. So I'm not talking about the product or solution or anything, but it's a really cool place, very inclusive. Day one, the CTO and founder is introducing diversity and inclusion training. I just thought that was fantastic. So one, that's interesting. But two, I think how many people are as geeked out about their jobs and about doing this stuff in B2B, right? That's what I loved about being an analyst, is being around lots of people who are like that. And what's really cool is finding another group of people who are really, really geeked out about that. Not just inside 6th Sense, but our customers and all of that too. So to me, that's really fun. I'm an introvert. I don't, if I walk into a room and I don't know what anybody's interested or whatever, I would just prefer to go home and read a book. But if I'm in a room with a bunch of people who are interested in the stuff I'm interested in, I never want to leave. I want to talk to everybody. I never want to leave. And that's what I feel like we have. I think that's probably one of the nicest things that I've seen post Forrester and 6th Sense or Serious Decisions. The other thing is how much I still talk every day to half of my analyst friends back at Forrester and 6th Sense.
It's kind of like same, but different, right?
Part of it is everywhere I go, there I am.
Well, awesome. You guys have been very gracious with your time here. I know we went over a few minutes. Megan, any closing thoughts before we kind of close things down here?
Just a big thank you. We appreciate you guys joining us today, and so many really, really good things to talk about here, and appreciate the perspectives and the ideas. So big thank you. And thank you to folks joining us as well. Brandon, Lenice, Joe, super happy to see you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Latane, Kerry, thank you for investing the time. We had a Zoom hiccup this morning that we kind of soldiered through, and we got a few people sending me emails saying, hey, it's not working. So thank you for soldiering through that. And next week, we have a conversation with Bambora, the head of growth. We'll be talking about intent data there. So, and Bambora, Latane, keep me honest on this. It's actually Kate Atner. Charles is, he's famously funny.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
We have a lot of former alumni there as well. So we sure do. That's great.
Yeah, terrific conversation today, and really food for thought about elevating what Latane was saying about elevating the conversation from a chief market officer as opposed to marketing, and then Kerry's point of view about where to meet the buyer and when. I think that's really critical insight. So thank you again for joining us this morning.
For your flexibility, appreciate it.
All right, I think we're